Welcome to the High Income Business Writing Podcast, helping you propel your writing business to a whole new level. And now, here's your host, Ed Gandia.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the High Income Business Writing Podcast, the number one podcast for freelance writers, copywriters, and solo marketers who want to earn more in less time doing work they love for better clients. With over 1.3 million downloads from listeners just like you across 101 countries. Today, I want to talk about something that might be the most important skill you develop over the next year. It has nothing to do with AI tools or prompting or building workflows. And that is the ability to hear what a client actually needs before you pitch them anything. Now, that might seem like a simple thing to do, but what I've learned from years of coaching writers and solo marketers is this. Most of us are terrible at this. We get on a call with a prospect, they describe a problem, and our brain immediately jumps to the deliverable. So they say, we need help with content. They might tell you a little bit about it. And we start thinking about blog posts and white papers, email sequences. We hear a deliverable request and we immediately start asking deliverable-based questions, what I like to refer to as logistics questions. So how long is the piece? Whom do I need to interview? What background materials do you already have that you can send me? When do you need the first draft? That sort of thing. And look, to be fair, most of us have made a very good living over the years with this approach in an environment where the execution layer, meaning doing the work and being able to do it correctly, when that was the really valuable piece, then guess what? There were only a few of us who could do that as a percentage of all the professionals in the world, which meant that that's where the constraint was. That was the bottleneck, is finding the right kinds of writers. So when that was the constraint, you could get away with asking those types of questions, and that's it, and then get to work. But that kind of questioning is designed to present only one thing, a deliverable-based offer. Again, that worked fine for a long time, but in an AI-shaped market where the kinds of help clients need are shifting and expanding and evolving, that instinct will cost you. It will cost you in deals you didn't win because you pitched the wrong thing. It will cost you in engagements that started off on the wrong foot. And it's going to cost you in relationships where the client never quite felt like he understood the real situation. And look, I'm not immune from this. I am going to be celebrating 20 years of self-employment this summer. And for a big part of my freelance writing and copywriting career, I thrived on deliverables and asking deliverable-based questions. And still to this day, my wiring is such that I will default to those kinds of questions if I'm not careful. So recently, I met with a prospective client who I thought was going to need AI help in terms of training and workflow design and those sorts of things. And I was really excited because I'm moving more of my business in that direction. And I met with them, and I met actually with a couple of people in the company, and I was just ready to ask those types of questions. Okay, so what do you use right now? Who needs to be trained? What are you trying to accomplish? With, again, all around training. So we're not talking about writing deliverables, but I just want to show you how even to this day, I have to be very careful because I went into it thinking they needed X. And then as the conversation developed, I realized that what they actually need is something different, at least this particular vice president I met with. So I'm thinking, great, this is going to be a great training engagement. And as I'm asking questions, I quickly realized that this particular VP has a different problem. And his problem is that of a large prospect list they had bought. And this is a business-to-business situation, but they had bought a few years ago that they never used. And they knew that there was gold inside that list, but they never took the time to parse through that list and figure out, okay, where is the gold? How do we identify it? How do we score it and qualify it? And then what outreach campaigns or strategy do we use? So there's a lot to this, but it would have been very easy for me to say, oh, that's really interesting. So, okay, great. How do you want to use AI for this? Right. And that, I think, is the way many of us just approach these situations. The short story here, the short version of it, is that I was able to quickly pivot. I caught myself and I realized I need to follow his lead and just probe a little bit more deeply into what's going on here, what he needs, why it's important to him, and what success would look like, and how we would know if we have reached success. And I'm glad that I turned things around, that I pivoted my questioning, because basically I was able to land the engagement. And sure, you know what? Internally, I was able to use AI to help me with some of the deliverables and some of the thinking and processing around, the different pieces of the project that I needed to help them with. And then, as it turned out, part of my recommendations will involve deploying some very specific and surgical use cases for AI with their team to be able to go ahead and deploy this. So anyway, my point is that had I come in with this mindset of I'm just going to pitch some kind of training or workflow design engagement, I would have fallen into the trap of asking the wrong things. And I would have not been able to pivot and land this engagement, because guess what? He wouldn't have felt heard. He would have felt that what I'm offering is not what he's looking for. And he would have just walked away from that opportunity or from that deal. So I'm glad I did that. And I just wanted to show you that to this day, I still am tempted to fall into this trap. But my point here today is that I want you to think differently about how you approach every conversation with a prospect. And I want to give you the framework so you can start hearing the signals instead of just the surface level request. Now, let me set up the core idea here. When a prospect reaches out to you, they almost always lead with a deliverable. We need a case study. We need someone to help us with a blog or a series of blog posts. We're looking for help with AI, right? That's the surface layer. Underneath that surface request, there is a signal, and the signal tells you what they actually need, which is often different from what they ask for. So back in my last episode 394, I walked through 4 broad categories of help that clients are buying right now outside of written deliverables. And this is important to know, because even if you continue to offer writing services, you're going to start seeing, and probably already seeing, the opportunity to help clients beyond just writing. Clients also need help and guidance with their content strategy or plan. Many also need help thinking about understanding, designing, or implementing AI workflows or systems within their teams. And in that episode, I introduced 4 broad categories of help that clients are starting to look for. And those are strategic advisory, training and enablement, proof of concept builds, and implementation of workflow. Now, if you heard that episode, great. But if not, don't worry. You don't need to pause this and go check that out. What matters today, although I do encourage you to check it out, but what matters today is learning to recognize which kind of help a prospect needs before you default to whatever you're most comfortable selling, or before you make too many assumptions, like I almost did with this particular client. Because here's what happens when you get it wrong. You pitch done-for-you content package to someone who actually needed help figuring out their content strategy. Or maybe you propose a big implementation project when all they really needed was a small proof of concept to show their boss. Or you offer to write something when the real problem is that their internal team doesn't know how to use AI tools effectively and keeps producing garbage. Every one of those mismatches kills a deal. Or worse, it lands you on a project that just feels off from day one because you're solving the wrong problem. So let's get practical. I've identified 6 signals that come up over and over in prospect conversations. And each one of those signals points to a different underlying need. Once you learn to hear them, you're going to know which of your offers to reach for, or whether to reach for an offer at all. The first signal is overwhelm. And it sounds something like this. We know we need to do something with AI, but we don't know where to start. Or there's so many tools and everyone has an opinion. We just need someone to help us figure out what actually makes sense for us. Now, I'm using an AI example, but fill in the blank. It could be anything else. The point is, you got to look and read between the lines here, because when you hear this kind of statement, the prospect doesn't need a deliverable. They need what? They need clarity. That's someone who's looking for clarity. They need someone who assess their situation, cut through the noise, and help them build a plan. This is a strategic advisory conversation. And many times they're not that clean. I'm giving you kind of the cleanest version just so you can see what I'm talking about. But my point is that as people who have made a great living for many, many years in some cases, and sometimes decades, the temptation here is to jump in with a solution. Oh, you should definitely be using AI for your case studies. Let me show you how. But that's you projecting your expertise onto their situation before you even understand it. So the idea here and what you want to force yourself to do is to slow down, ask more questions, figure out what they've tried, figure out what's working, ask what isn't working and where the real bottlenecks are. Then propose a paid assessment or a strategy session, not a production project. All right, so that's signal number one. Signal number two is a skill gap. This shows up as something to the effect of, our team is using ChatGPT, but the output is inconsistent. Or we bought licenses for these tools, but nobody really knows how to use them well. Or sometimes something like this. We need our people to get better at this thing, at AI. This person doesn't need you to do the work for them. They need you to teach your team how to do it. So that's what? That's a training and enablement opportunity. What makes this tricky is that clients will often frame a skill gap as a production need. They'll say, we need someone to write our content, when what they really mean is our team keeps producing mediocre AI-assisted drafts, and we need someone to fix this. If you just take the writing assignment because you didn't ask enough questions, you'll be stuck doing the work indefinitely. If you hear the skill gap signal, however, you can propose something that actually solves the root problem, which is structured training, prompt frameworks, workflow templates, quality standards, that sort of thing. All right, moving on to the third signal, skepticism about whether something will work. You'll hear something like, we've heard about AI workflows, but we're not really convinced that that's what we need. Or we tried something like this before, it didn't go really well. Or my boss needs to see proof before we invest in a bigger engagement. I've heard several of these over the past few months. And this is someone who needs to see it to believe it. And by the way, I should tell you, and I won't get into all the details, this is one I've had to learn the hard way, because until a few months ago, I didn't have the signal on my radar, but I made a big mistake that caused me an opportunity and a great prospect who decided to not engage me. And then after the fact, when I was doing a postmortem, I realized, I didn't dig deep enough. I didn't read between the lines, and I proposed something that didn't really match where they were. They were being more skeptical, and I just overlooked that. And that cost me. It cost me a big opportunity to do a lot with this particular client. And there's still a chance I may be able to come back, but it's going to be a little difficult and I'm going to have to wait. So in a situation like this, these are people who they've been burned, they've made mistakes, there's a lot of hesitation, a lot of skepticism. They need to see it to believe it. They don't need a strategy deck. They don't need a training program. What they want is a small, concrete, low-risk demonstration that actually works. And we could call it a proof of concept build. So say someone tells you their content team wastes an hour every week on research and outlining. You don't want to pitch a 6-month retainer. You don't want to pitch a road mapping session. What you do is you offer to build one research workflow as a contained pilot. Let them see it in action. Let the results do the selling for you. The bigger engagement can come after that, once that skepticism is gone. All right, moving on to the fourth signal, which is capacity. This is a bit more straightforward than the others, but it sounds something like this. We know what we need, we just need someone to build it. Or we've mapped out the workflow, we need help implementing it. Or we don't have the bandwidth to set all this up ourselves. That's an implementation conversation. The client has already done the thinking. They have the strategy. Now they need someone with the skill and the hours to execute. They need workflows built, prompts written. They need templates deployed, systems integrated, and so forth. That's the situation I'm in right now with that client that I mentioned earlier, where I thought I was going to come in and pitch training. And next thing I knew, their need was very different. And some of my recommendations involve the need for implementation help. So this is an interesting idea. Sometimes by solving a problem, you now create visibility into the fact that they have other problems now they need to solve, right? And that's where I am right now. And I'm about to turn in all the deliverables and walk them through what I created and then make it very clear to them that there are some things that they're going to have to deploy. And I'm going to offer to help them with those implementations. I'm not sure if they're going to take me up on it, but I think there's a pretty decent chance they will. Now, let's talk about the risk here with this signal, which is undervaluing the work. So implementation sounds like just doing stuff, but good implementation requires real expertise because you have to be the one making sure that the system actually works day to day. And so that means you need to price it accordingly. I have found many times it's more work and it requires a higher level of expertise than you originally thought. And guess what? The good news is the value is higher as well. So this is a great opportunity because this is where the rubber meets the road. And if you can help them make it work, which often involves some change management, then you could be a hero. Signal number 5. This one is a subtle one. And this is when the client is asking for the wrong format. So let's say they need a blog post, but when you dig into the conversation, what they actually need is an internal decision-making document. Or they ask for a webinar when what they really need is a one-on-one strategy session with their leadership team. Or they request AI content when what actually helped them is a prompt library their team can use independently. This happens all the time, and it's one of the main reasons the skill of diagnosing well matters so much. The client frames their needs in the format they're familiar with, and your job is to hear the underlying problem and, when appropriate, just gently redirect them toward what would actually serve them better. You gotta do it gently, you gotta do it carefully and respectfully, but you still have to do it. You can't ignore that signal. And the good news is if you do it well, this is where you're going to earn trust. Because when you say, I could absolutely write that blog post for you, but based on what you described, I think the best way I could serve you, or I think what would actually move the needle is something different, is more along the lines of blank. And you stop being a vendor when you do that. You stop being someone who just cranks out deliverables and you start being what? You start being more of a trusted advisor. That's a completely different relationship. All right, the final signal, signal number 6. Sometimes there's no hidden complexity. The client knows exactly what they need. The format is right, the scope is clear, and they just need a skilled person to do the work well. They need a strong writer, or they need a reliable executor, someone who can take a clear brief and deliver something excellent. Sometimes when you ask all the right questions and you hear the answers, you realize, okay, yeah, they got this scoped out really well. It all makes sense. I understand the logic. I think it's sound. I think they know exactly what they need, and I agree with the requests. I agree with the reasoning. Now, I want to be honest about this because I don't want to leave you with the impression that every conversation is a puzzle to be decoded. Many of the examples I've given you, yeah, they're asking for one thing, but if you ask better questions and you listen critically to what they're saying, the core need is actually different. But sometimes their surface request is the real need, and that's perfectly fine. Your job is not to find something that's not there. Your job is to find what the real need is. And sometimes, hey, they got everything dialed in, and there's nothing wrong with execution work. Good execution work still has value, especially when you bring speed, quality, and AI-enhanced efficiency to it. The key, though, is knowing the difference. The key is knowing what questions to ask. The key is that you want to recognize a clean execution opportunity for what it is and deliver it brilliantly rather than overcomplicating a straightforward ask. And you want to recognize the other 5 signals so you're not accidentally treating everything like a clean execution opportunity when there's really a bigger, better fit engagement sitting there right in front of you. So those are the 6 signals: overwhelm, skill gap, skepticism, capacity, wrong format, and clean execution. So let me tie this back to something I've been talking about already in the podcast and in my newsletter all month long. You should have some offers ready. 2 or 3 strong offers in your back pocket built around the kinds of help that you're best at delivering. That's not optional. Walking into a conversation with nothing to offer is really not the ideal situation. And that's just as bad as walking in with the wrong thing. But having offers is only half the equation. The other half is diagnosis. It's the ability to sit in a conversation, to listen carefully, to resist the urge to pitch too early, and match what you hear to what you know you can deliver. So think of it like this. Your offers are the tools on your bench. Okay, they're there for the right application. Diagnosis is knowing which tool to pick up, and you need both. So you have to be careful when you have offers created in your back pocket not to automatically default to those. You still have to diagnose well. And if the ideal solution for this client involves something else that you haven't created, an offer that you don't currently have in your back pocket, then that's the way you should go. You should create something new. Sometimes the right solution is a blend of the offers you have created. And again, sometimes it's not an offer, it's just doing custom work for the client, custom execution work for the client. You just have to know what to pick. You have to diagnose and prescribe effectively. And here's the part that makes this feel less intimidating. You don't have to get it right the first 5 minutes of a call. Diagnosis is a conversation. It's not a quiz. You ask questions, good questions. You listen. You ask probing follow-up questions, clarifying questions. You reflect back what you're hearing. You check your understanding. And if the signal shifts mid-conversation, that's fine. You adjust. The goal is never to arrive at the perfect answer on the spot. You're not expected to do that. The goal is to leave the conversation knowing enough to propose the right next step. Sometimes that's a paid assessment. Sometimes it's a small pilot. Sometimes it's a full proposal. And sometimes just a follow-up email that says, here's what I heard, and here's what I think would help. And you know what? Sometimes it's okay to say to the client or prospect, okay, so now that we've confirmed what I heard, I need to give this some thought. Pretty sure I'll be able to help you here, but let me have a day to think through this a little bit more deeply and get back to you. Sometimes taking the time is fine. I think one of the things that stresses out writers the most is they feel they have to perform. They have to pitch right there on the spot. They have to deliver all of the details immediately to the prospect or the client in that discovery call. Sometimes that's not the best thing to do. Sometimes you need to think about this. That example I gave you earlier, where I thought I was going in to pitch some training, and then I realized, wait a minute, this is something different. I asked a different set of questions. I listened critically. I reiterated what I heard. The prospect confirmed all of this, and I asked for a couple of days to get back to him. But I need to think about this and get back to you. And you know what? He totally respected that. And again, as you already know, I was able to put the proposal together. They accepted and all worked out well. So here's what I would encourage you to do this week. If you have any prospect calls, if you have any conversations coming up with prospects or clients, go in with these 6 signals in mind. Print them out if you need to. Keep them next to your notepad. And then after each call, take 2 minutes to jot down what you heard. Which signal was loudest? What did the client actually need versus what they asked for? Did you feel the pull to pitch too early? And if so, what would have happened if you would have waited and asked one more question? This is a skill that gets better with practice. So be patient with yourself. Practice, practice, practice. And once you develop it, everything changes. Your conversations become more collaborative, your proposals land more accurately, and you stop losing deals to misalignment. Over the next few weeks, we're going to do a deeper dive into how to test your offers in the market and how to pivot gracefully when you realize a prospect needs something different from what you actually came in to sell. And we're going to do it through my newsletter and my podcast. So be on the lookout for that, because this is important stuff. The skill of diagnosing well is the foundation for all of this. Thanks for listening. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And just a quick reminder to grab your free copy of my latest book, Earn More in Less Time: The Proven Mindset, Strategies, and Actions to Prosper as a Freelance Writer. You can get your free copy at b2blauncher.com, where you will also find the detailed show notes to this and all my other episodes. Enjoy and have a great day.